Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, this week we haven't got Curtis because, again, he's having a well-earned week off with the family, and he's in Molly, his dog, on the coast somewhere enjoying the great British weather. I'm sure he's probably spending more of his time in the pub with some nice local ale on the table. So this week, as we're getting close to the end of 2025, thinking about sort of 2026 there, we've got two different guests on today. We've got David Bilsborough, who you've heard a few times, who's joined us on the podcast when Curtis has been off. And we do, David has been a long listener to the podcast and a friend to both myself and Curtis. And he's the owner of Cheshire Cars, who's joined us. But alongside David, we've also got Stephen Whitton, who you'll know from the intro there, and Unmissable, and has joined us several times on the podcast. But what we thought with this time, we had a bit of a special, and the last time that you'll hear from Stephen this year in terms of his Unmissable moments, we thought we'd get Stephen on live to chat through some of the stories today that we're keeping fairly brief because it's more of a chat between the three of us. And at the halfway point, we'll get Stephen's top tips on Unmissable moments in terms of mental health and wellbeing and what people should be thinking about now as we put 2025 behind us and start to think about 2026. So welcome, gentlemen, to the podcast live. So good morning to you both.
Hello, how are you?
Very well on this wet and miserable morning, but we're all right. And I say, so Curtis is probably sat in some pub somewhere or enjoying a cup of tea and a cake this morning somewhere.
And when you said you're going to keep it brief this time, is that aimed at me?
Me as well, and David. So the three of us,
Never me. I'm not having that. Good morning, Phil and Stephen. Good morning. Good to be here with you both. And yes, it's almost the end of the year.
It is.
Oh, no.
So we like I say, we've only got a few stories that we'll have a quick chat about today. But obviously, I think first off, guys, what have you been up to lately? What you're on with, what's happening, how have you felt the year has gone so far, David? What's your thought? What's your thoughts at the minute? What have you been up to? How's the year been for you?
Well, it's fine lines, isn't it? Always fine lines in retail. Those fine lines really surround, for me, the purchasing requirement of stock. It's very, very not difficult, but challenging. And I think looking at my figures, I just did a coming together of all the figures for the cars purchased this year. Had the cars that I agreed to purchase come through, I would have had the best year in 30 years. So it hasn't been the case for the reasons that the sellers haven't always been happy to sell them, which is disappointing.
Yes.
But nevertheless, we've been holding our own, and the profit is slightly up on per unit, which is good, and the units are slightly up as well. So I'm not disappointed at all. In fact, September, October, November have been very, very, very strong months.
It's probably a message that some others couldn't probably thinking of. It seems to be that kind of mixed marketplace at the minute that
it's very mixed. Yeah.
But you have to work for it, don't you? I think the key is that you have to put a lot of effort into, for you, particularly buying those cars, you've got to put a lot of work and effort into that.
Yeah, I think if you target something for your business and find a niche for the business, as you know, we do quite a few of baths, and that's become a mainstay of the business these last 5 or 6 years. But we're just starting to, and I alluded to this last time I came on, Tesla has been quite good for us as well. So Tesla, well, it's been very good actually. We've had 3 recently, and they've all gone out within a matter of days, and I could have sold them again 2, 3 or 4 times over each one of them. So we're trying to buy some more Teslas for those obvious reasons.
So it sounds like an optimistic outlook for 2026 then.
can't wait to get going. I'm just trying to get Christmas out of the way and get back into the office. No, I'm going to have a break and look forward to starting probably Boxing Day because I think the people will start coming on the phone and emails on Boxing Day, so we'll be ready for them. But who knows? I might be wrong, and it might not start until January. So, but we're ready. We're ready.
Your family.
Yeah, we're ready regardless. So obviously, Frankie, my first grandchild, has arrived, as you know.
Yeah.
So I shall be spending Christmas Day with my granddaughter and mum and dad. So that'll be good.
I'm going to say first Christmas with the grandfather.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What a delightful thing to look forward to, Frankie.
Yeah. And Stephen, what have you been up other than suffering with the man flu or the flu that's going around or COVID or whatever it is these days? What have you been up to?
Yeah, the man flu. That's doing my head in. I mean, I've fortunately dodged it for about 2 years, but I had it about 3 weeks ago, and it's come back with a vengeance. So, but apart from that, yes, this year has been about clarity really for us at Menable, and me personally as well. Made a major house move, moved up into the Midlands from nearer London where I was, and along with that brought a fair chunk of clarity really. And I sat down one day and talked to my ambassadors and the team and said, we need a sort of defined purpose for Menable, and I'll be honest, it came out of the fact that I'm a trustee for a cancer charity in Milton Keynes that I absolutely love, and we defined that purpose for that as no one should go through cancer alone, which is what that charity is about. And it just dawned on me, and I thought, well, wow, that's what Menable's about, is about creating a sort of a sense of connectedness, if you like, throughout the industry, and came up with our purpose, which is everyone safe always. So off the back of that's then driven what we've been doing. So we've opened up the Mental Wealth Pioneers program. We've got a number of things going on in terms of the work that we've been doing, and some real pivotal stuff when we actually get teams together and start them talking.
Yeah,
and it's amazing what comes out of that. So
I think that's the key.
All round clarity, really.
Getting people talking, getting people together and talking, keeping safe. Totally. I think you probably sat there with your COVID mask on, aren't you, most of the time at the minute?
I definitely am. Yeah, I was on the train yesterday with a mask on, and people were giving me funny looks, and I thought, well, okay, would you rather I coughed and sneezed all over you then?
Yeah, well, I hope. I mean, I this week I've been. I had the privilege to be invited to the all-party parliamentary group on electric vehicles, which was quite a privilege. That via Perry Moon, who many of you may know, he's a backbench MP now. He was Mannheim and Auto Trader previously, so he's a well-known name across the automotive sector, but he heads up a lot of the automotive agendas now for the UK government. So yeah, it was a privilege to be invited down to Westminster to go and have a bit of a conversation, a closed round table debate on the 3 pence per mile and 1.5 pence per mile, and whether the UK should consider either deferring, revising, or scrapping the ZEV mandate now, and what the other things they should be considering for the automotive sector, particularly on the transition to electric. And David, you were mentioning it before we started to record, what does this mean now? The Trump administration has now reversed the Biden CAFE ruling on their miles per gallon. So I think it's gone from a target of 54 down to 30 odd miles per gallon, which then the reaction from people like Ford and GM were get back to building some, V8 trucks back into the US market. And we know that there's conversations taking place currently in Europe about deferring the ban on ICE vehicles until 2040, which would put the UK 10 years ahead of Europe with the current deadline. But then there's also the other side politically that will it be negative because it will be seen as yet another flip-flop or a U-turn So there's lots going on. So no, I had the pleasure of being down there with many people from across the sector. Tom from the BVLA, Patrick from Claire Watt. There was Laura and Mark from Auto Trader, Warren, Ryan Phillips from Eva England, Tristan Young. You'll know from Auto Insight. Spent a bit of time talking to Tristan. So no, it was great. But busy day down in London. So I think, Stephen, I might be getting something from that journey into London and back out again from everybody that weren't wearing a mask on the train. And I suspect over the weekend I'll probably I'm starting feeling a little bit now, but probably get a bit of a sniffly cold. But yeah, lots going on, I think, for everybody at the minute. So. So I think what we'll do, we'll just go shortly into some headlines between the three of us and have a quick chat, and we'll just hear a little bit from about our sponsors next.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
So companies already featured in our series of supply specials include Prospecting Dynamics, the CRM specialist led by Nancy Rignall, working with some of the UK's biggest dealer groups. We've got Ivendi, the motor finance tech provider, ETT, who are shaking up the AI dealer call handling market. We've got Generational, the EV battery health test provider, and MTC, who are disrupting the way dealer websites are designed and built. You can find all these and many others in your podcast feed. And if you'd like to profile your business, then just message myself or Curtis at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
So the headlines we'll be covering today: from car dealer, Ford to utilise Renault 5 platform as car makers agree landmark strategic partnership. That's easy for some to say. We'll be heading over to AM Online, which is Pyron urges automotive retailers to close the gap between AI and emotion in the car sales process. And then after the break, after we'll be talking with Stephen Whitton about top tips for 2026, we'll talk a little bit from a story on Motor Finance Online about UK number plate rules linked to crime concerns. And then finally, we'll have a look at Motor Trader. And this is that buying the reputable dealer is the most important factor for used car buyers. So as I say there, the first story is over in Car Dealer, and this brought this week that Ford to utilise Renault 5 platform as car makers agreed landmark strategic partnership. And this is that Ford and Renault have signed a landmark partnership which will see the Blue Oval utilise the French firm's Ampere EV platform. So this is quite an interesting one, Stephen and David. I mean, at the minute, we are seeing a lot of collaborations right up to that top level between OEMs in that global space. We know that Ford, over recent years, with the end of the Ford Focus, the Ford Fiesta, which was the biggest shock to the sector, losing that super mini that Ford dominated for such a long time. But it looks like Ford are moving back into that marketplace a little bit, into that sort of super mini, but through EV, with the launch of this using the new Renault 5 platform. And I think it's launched for over in 2028 is the plan. So what's your thoughts on this one, David? I mean, you've been around this Ford Fiesta and Ford for a long time. I mean, good move for them?
I think it is a good move. Obviously, when they decided that Fiesta was to be no more, that took probably all those not connected to Ford directly by quite some surprise, including me. I just thought, well, that maybe is going too soon. I understand its cost implications, maybe to get the Fiesta into hybrid or to full EV must not be. I wouldn't say it wouldn't be possible, but it's the costing, isn't it? So with the Renault 5, they've already got a platform, haven't they?
Yes.
Which is obviously Ford have a history as well, don't they, with the KA and the Fiat 500?
Yeah.
And there's plenty of manufacturers that do share technology, engine technology and chassis technology. So we shouldn't be too surprised, but I think it's a good move for Ford. Probably for both really, Renault and Ford. So I can't really see them not making a success of it. And Renault obviously got a fantastic platform, haven't they? So, who wouldn't be interested?
No, exactly. And Stephen, I mean, you've before moving into what you do now, and not away from the automotive sector, but Ford were the dominant brand, weren't they? Alongside your Vauxhall and others. I mean, and they've lost that ground over recent years, haven't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, I grew up when in the UK the top three were Ford, GM, and Rover. Anyone remember them?
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at what's happened the last 30 odd years, these kind of collaborations and strategic partnerships are nothing new, are they? They're just the way the industry has gone, if you like. But as you could probably imagine, my thoughts around stuff like this always go straight to, well, what's the implication on people?
Yeah.
And what that will mean in terms of people's well-being and sort of redundancies or anything like that, maybe. Although by the sound of it, it might actually be the opposite. So
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think there's this is planned for 2028, and obviously market and the comments there from Jim Farley, who many will know as the president and CEO of Ford Motor Company, saying that the strategic partnership with Renault Group marks an important step for Ford and supports their strategy to build a highly efficient and fit for the future business in Europe there. So, I mean, there's no confirmation. I think it will come to the UK. I think I'd assume that coming from Jim Farley there when he's talking about Europe, that will include the UK. But I say sometimes at the minute, and the three of us might be thinking 2028 in today's market is a long time away at the minute, and there's nothing that can happen between now and 2028.
Yeah, I do think there's going to be some interesting years ahead of us, isn't there, for EV and hybrid and ICE vehicles. I think it's going to be an interesting time. There's going to be plenty of content, Philip, for the Motor Trade Radio, I'm sure.
Yeah, there will be. I'm sure there will be. So let's say, I mean, hopefully this is a good move for Ford. I think this partnership with Renault, I think we know that the new Renault 5 has done really well at the minute. It's getting some good order take and good volume in the market there. Obviously, at the minute, as I said earlier, the things is that obviously the news comes after the EU announced that it would be pushing back its ban on new ICE vehicle car sales from 2035 to 2040. So, it begs to question that, how soon do they need to move with this kind of product into the marketplace? But next on the headlines is, as I said there, that Pyron urges automotive retailers to close the gap between AI and emotion in car sales. And this has come from AM Online. And this is Jons Peter Schauberg, and hopefully I've pronounced that correctly, who's the co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Pyron, told UK dealer executives that the emotional value built into new car sales launch is a thing that is lost long before most buyers reach a retailer's website. And this is quite an interesting statement from them. And I kind of get where they're coming from a little bit with this one, because the new car launch is all here it's coming, etc. And then you don't see the car for a while. And the talk here, and maybe this is Stephen in your world, thinking about people and well-being and mental psychology to a degree, but it says here that purchase decisions and the subconscious mind that research published back in 2002 by Harvard Business School academic Gerald Zoltman suggested that 95% of purchase decisions are made in the subconscious mind. So what's our thoughts on this one around AI and emotion?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I used to, years ago when I was doing sales training before the Menable days, we always used to say, every decision's made emotionally and then backed up logically afterwards. And I'm certainly the same when it comes to that. And I think this whole AI thing is moving so fast. And I think many of us, when we met at AM Live recently, were just blown away by how many suppliers there were there that were talking about, AI suppliers. I mean,
Yeah.
sort of around the outsides of that exhibition. So, yeah, just sort of watching it with interest to see where that's all going to go, if I'm honest. But yeah, I think there's still, the emotion side of it is a key driver, and yeah, you're right. That's subconscious.
And David, I mean, it says here that that Jons basically makes a point that he noted that the modern car buying process may involve around 400 touch points, which many of which the dealers have no control over. And
Well, yeah, I'm not quite sure what is meaning by that entirely, but let's look at it, strip it away, and look at AI. Obviously, all three of us will use AI to a degree. I've used it and will continue to use it in our daily lives, and that will be for most people, I think, as we go forward. In terms of, is it good, is it not so good, or what do we think? When personally, I've actually started to put a line in each advert saying this advert was made by a human and not an AI program.
okay.
So that might be controversial for some retailers. No, don't do that. Well, I am doing that because I am actually making each advert individually.
Yeah.
And each advert is individual to that vehicle. So obviously, going back to baths, we have a lot of baths, but each one is individual. So we treat it as such. And I believe that you can run a business, run your life successfully with AI, but within a reasonable level of AI, I think it's very helpful if you want to find something very quickly. It can be helpful if you've not got a serious question to ask somebody in a big corporation. It'll give you an AI route option to engage with. So there's pros and cons, isn't there? I think, without going too deeply into it, it has got the potential to replace humans in lots of areas. So I think we should all be aware of that. I'm sure Stephen's very aware of that. But so for Cheshire Cars, you'll be able to interact with a human being at all stages
No
of your.
boxes here.
Yes, not a chat bot. We don't even have a chat box. No.
I feel a new sponsorship coming on, Phil.
Well, who knows? But I think that's quite. I think there's some sort of road ahead to be used for companies such as mine that want to promote. No, you can speak to a human being. We will speak to you, or you can speak to us. And if you email us, we will be emailing you back. It will be a human emailing you back. I think one of the concerns, I don't know whether you guys have heard this, but when you talk about AI, some of the people engaged in it themselves say, "Oh yes, we can tell a mile off it's written by AI," and that's worrying, isn't it? And I think quite worrying, really, when people are saying, "No, that's definitely rewritten by AI."
Yeah.
And where does that leave an employer?
There's elements of. Does it get to a point that some people not bothered? They accept that certain interactions, certain communication is acceptable, that it's done by AI because it's certain, it's giving an answer that you want, it's giving the information that you've asked for, it's giving it effectively, efficiently, and accurately, and hopefully in most cases or all cases. But it, and I think the balance at the minute, talking with people such as Impel and ETT and others that operate within the AI sector, and you were both at the VRA event recently with Sean McGeer from Devon that talked a little bit about how to use AI and the dangers of how to use AI. But it's one of these that, rather, not at the minute, not having maybe 100% reliance on the AI, that you don't leave everything to it, that you use it. And I think there is a comment in this story from John's there, that saying that by combining inventory data, customer information, and OEM material with other data points, he said that AI can identify patterns and opportunities that were not visible before. So I suppose it's trying to think about how AI can be used within the normal processes to give you those opportunities.
And I think you've just hit the nail on the head there, Phil, because up and down the country, today there will be 8:30 sales meetings going on that are the same format and the same approach that we've used for decades. And this is where I think AI is probably most feared, because, it is a massive opportunity. We just don't know what the opportunity is yet. And we do have a tendency to resist change. And I think that's where it involves, some sort of forthright and foresight in terms of leadership to think about, right, how do we embrace this? What do we need to do differently?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the AI is certainly, part of the future. I think it's how we're going to use it in the short, medium term, whilst we figure out where it sits within the process within organisations, and to your point, David, that using doesn't want to take it over fully from Cheshire Cars. You've built a name, a reputation over the years for your personalisation, your engagement, your high level of customer satisfaction that you offer to your consumers. But then how do you use that in the big organisations that make them more efficient for those organisations that don't have that personal interaction as you do, don't answer the emails and inquiries as efficiently as you do, David? That I'm sure that if you don't let any inquiries lapse,
No.
You'll be straight on it. But that's unfortunately not the case across the entire sector, is it?
No, it's not, Phil. I think that is a very pertinent way of looking at things. I think generally speaking, the motor trade is operators like myself with 5 or 10 vehicles, right up until multinationals with thousands of vehicles, hundreds, thousands of staff, and they've got different needs to somebody such as myself. So I'm very blessed and very fortunate to be able to still interact with my buyers and sellers, because obviously we buy and sell cars, obviously, and that's can be done with some AI, but ultimately, we still handwrite each advert, and we take great care about it because we want the information to be there, and we know through experience what buyers are looking for in the first 2-3 paragraphs.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think if you look at Tesla, how they deal with AI, I don't know how much AI is in their market, but it will be quite a lot, I guess, because you don't see a human being booking a Tesla in to have it serviced or repaired. Yeah. So I think it can work, and it does work. So I'm definitely not saying it's a bad thing, but I think with everything you need to find a happy medium with it, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. So we'll be back after this short break with our chat with Stephen Whitton on our midway Menable moments, and thinking about top tips as we move into 2026 of what you should be thinking about with yourself, your colleagues, your organisations, your businesses around mental health and wellbeing.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. Next up is our latest Menable moment, looking at mental wealth and wellbeing awareness and best practice in the automotive sector. With me, Stephen Whitton.
Well, over to you, Stephen. What's your top tips that listeners to this morning's podcast should be thinking about now for 2026 around mental health, well-being for themselves, their colleagues, their organisations, their teams, or wherever they are from listening in the sector today?
Well, firstly, I wish I sounded like that on that jingle just then, right now. So, so my first top tip is anything that's got some kind of menthol in it. Yeah, I mean, continuing the stuff that we've been doing this year and around getting clarity and getting teams talking, what's become fairly evident is our top tips for this are do what you can do to create a shoulder-to-shoulder approach. So very few people out there really like a kind of formal conversation around well-being and mental wealth. But they're quite happy to talk about stuff fairly openly if they feel that they're on sort of equal terms. And physically, if you do that shoulder to shoulder, so I use an image of it, for example, of two technicians fixing something on a car together. That's the perfect time to have that conversation. So our first top tip would be always try and create a shoulder to shoulder approach. When it comes to leaders, I've found that I've had we do a lot of work now around helping leaders to listen to understand rather than listening to respond. And I'm sure we all know people that when you're talking to them, you can see the cogs whirring and they're working out what they're going to say next, which really subconsciously kind of says, you're not really listening to me, are you? You're not really kind of understanding what I'm trying to tell you. And that's a fairly key skill, really, and particularly as a leader. So, in the world that we live in, with lots of leaders being very task focused, that's sort of tip number two, if you like. Then, when we get teams together, the thing that we've found is most powerful is doing this thing that we call meet them where they are. So asking questions like, what's got your attention before you came in here? And, what's going on for you in your life right now? So, you know, being in a kind of state of mind that is like, well, I kind of get it and I'm coming at it from your angle, if that makes sense. Um, a big one for us has been about creating mental wealth champions. Now, a lot of companies have got mental health first aiders, and that's brilliant. That's a great initiative. But the next step from that is going, right, well, what do those people need to do when they're back in the business and waving a flag for this subject? And being a mental wealth champion is key because it takes away the fear or the feeling that they have to be some kind of therapist or counsellor and actually work as a kind of representative of mental wealth across the business. So we've had some great success with that. There's some brilliant people out there, and these people come forward and you from where you might least expect. So they might actually be the parts advisors or the technicians or a driver or somebody who can keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the business. And my final top tip for 2026, and this is the first time I've mentioned this, is that we are going to open up Menable to other industries from the new year. And the reason for that is we feel that there's so much to share, and lots of other industries are doing some fantastic stuff that we want to tap into some of that best practice. So my final top tip is to join us, basically. So,
David, just listening to what Stephen's mentioned there, and I know mental health and well-being and getting that balance in your life is very close to your heart in
It
general,
is, yeah.
not just in your Cheshire car world, but personal life. I mean, what's your thoughts around what Stephen's talking about there and doing and thinking about, and people should think about as they head into 2026 from yourself?
Well, I thought it was an excellent set of sort of ideas and what they are doing at Menable. Listen to understand, I thought was really good thing, and a very clear thing, really. Listen to understand. I think that's perfect. Shoulder to shoulder. I've wrote that down. That's an excellent. And then I'll obviously meet them where they are and ask the questions and listen. I've got some great friends, and some of them are still my friends for many, many years, but they don't always listen.
Yeah.
And
Bad listeners, yes.
yeah, I might be sometimes myself guilty of that. So I'm not saying I'm not without fault in that area. But so I think Stephen's made some very, very valid points around mental health. Obviously, I won't go too much into it, but obviously, you both know my beliefs religiously, and I feel that that's my sort of one of my purposes in life is to spread the message of the Bible, albeit in a soft way, obviously, but that's what I do, and I believe in that. I believe in the spiritual side, and I think that has got me through some very, very difficult times, both in business and privately. So that's another thing that I do promote as well. But my tips, in addition to what Stephen's spoken about there, I would say we should embrace change. We shouldn't always accept the change. But we should always try and embrace it and give our point of view. Make sure that we're heard. Be clear, concise with that, in doing so. And then I've got down here listening. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So we need to realise that and offer solutions. And finally, to be engaging with both your staff and customers. And, just sometimes the simplest things can make a difference to a business. Yeah. So I suppose my ultimate tip to retailers would be this: when you're handing a car over to the buyer, or it's being delivered, however it's been handed over, make sure your staff are communicating to that buyer that you will buy that vehicle back should their circumstances change. Because I've started to implement that this year, and goodness me, it's made a massive difference with the people that are actually emailing and ringing me up saying, Dave, you said you might be buying the car back if we're interested. Would that be the case? And we've ended up buying cars back. So that's a phenomenal tip for every business of every size. Ensure your buyer knows that they can come back to you to resell you for you to buy the car back. Yeah. And it absolutely works.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more.
I would add to that as well that what you've touched on there, David, is, clearly you've got a very deep spiritual side, and what I see when I go out is that there are a lot of people out there, not just in our industry, but obviously that's where I'm mostly focused. Lots of people out there who lack a sense of purpose, and as a result, and you look into the business and you ask the business as well at CEO level, what's the purpose of the business? And I asked someone that the other day, and they said, it's to make money. I was, no, that's not a purpose, that's a goal.
That's great.
So when we have a sense of purpose, wherever that's coming from, wherever that's guided from, or whatever, that's what you've just linked to there, and that, honestly, that's transformational.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. As I say, thank you, Stephen and Dave, for that. I think clearly moving into 2026, we are, as a sector and as an individuals, we are going to face challenges. We're going to face change, and I think one thing was clear with that from both yourself and Stephen and David there, that have a conversation, pick up the phone to somebody, be there for somebody, be there to listen, have a conversation, whether that's a friend, a work colleague, an employee, whatever that is, whatever industry, that, just talking and listening is a big part. And like you say, those purposes. And, I speak to Stephen ad hocly on a telephone call. I'll do the same with David. We have our, general chats, just as a, how are things conversations. So, no, huge thanks. And Stephen will be joining us again in 2026 with more of his Menable moments. But if you do need to reach out and speak to Stephen from his Menable, then basically he can get you on LinkedIn anywhere, can't we, Stephen? I think.
I might, yeah, you
And you're
might
happy
find
to
me
get
on
involved
LinkedIn.
with
I'm on there.
businesses. You're
I'm
on
on there a little bit, aren't I?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do tend to go to most of the events as well. I mean, I've been told I'd go to the opening of an envelope, to be honest. So
Yeah.
and thanks to you and Curtis as well, Phil, for all your support, and Motors, of course, for continuing sort of sponsorship. So thank you for that.
No, it's fine. So we've got a couple of last stories here, just briefly, and the first one is in Motor Finance Online. UK number plate rules linked to crime concerns, and this is that the report was launched after specialists and MPs raised concerns about potential threats connected with registration plates. And I think that the three of us are old enough over the years to see all this. But interestingly, the report from the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Transport Safety, so it's one of their weeks this week, isn't it, has identified a UK number plate regulation crisis, warning that current vehicle plate systems are not effective enough to prevent their misuse by criminals and non-compliant drivers, and saying that the UK automotive number plate registration, the ANPR network, records close to 90 million plates daily through more than 18,000 cameras. Now, I'm sure people have a view on cameras in their own life. But this is all about ghost plates, the 3D printed plates, the spacing on plates, the 4D plates that are now, and I think there's even things called bubble plates and gel plates now. There's all sorts of things that you can get. And saying since July 2023, increased enforcement by TfL to issue more than 4,200 fines. Later checks on 800 vehicles saw a non-compliant drop to 38%, indicating more positive results than these efforts. So, I mean, this is kind of thing that's been talked about quite a bit, never really brought to the forefront, but I think it's going on a lot more. I mean, recently I've had a plate put on my car, and once you put a search for something, you're inundated with sponsored adverts for all these different plates, and I think it's a bit of a problem now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it goes back some years, actually, this problem, which they still haven't resolved. And that is that a plate manufacturer, who we are here, we make plates here, but we make them for ourselves, basically, for our retail sales vehicles. But nevertheless, we are a registered plate maker, a number plate maker. So you have to be registered, obviously, which is right and proper. And you have to follow guidelines and certain regulations within those regulations. But what these people are bypassing, it's very simple to close down, but it seemed to be overlooked. When the buyer of that plate that's not for road use is buying that number plate, the supplier will ask them to sign a declaration that they accept that the registration plate that has been supplied is not for road use. So it clears them, the maker of that number plate, of any responsibility. And that is a simple loophole that they're using without going into criminal activity, because we don't know whether there is or not, but there probably is people that have stolen number plate machines, makers, etc., and are using them for ill-gotten gains, which is terrible, obviously, and not correct, and should be condemned at every opportunity. But the simple one is they ask you, the buyer, to sign a declaration if you're asking them to make a plate as what would be just for show use only. Yeah. And those plates are being used on the road, not to mention, which we haven't in this, all those cars, some of them, where the number plate's in the window.
Yes.
It's jumped into the front window mysteriously.
Yeah, I've seen a few of them locally
Yes.
around me, but they're
Yes.
driving around in McLarens
Yeah.
and stuff that
Oh, are they
they
right?
think they're over in the US, that they don't need to have a front plate
Yeah.
on their vehicle. But yeah, it seems to be a growing issue there. So hopefully something will come from this, and it will close this problem down. And just heading to our final story, and this is in motortrader.com, saying that buying from a reputable dealer is the most important factor for used car buyers, and this is conducted research for the RAC dealer network and its after sales partners assurance, that the research shows seller trustworthiness, named by 62% of respondents, an increase from 59% in 2023 and 55% in 2021. So this is about trustworthiness now around what consumers want from their dealers. And Lee Coomer, a friend of mine, who's the RAC client director at Assurance, said that these results indicate buyers are primarily and increasingly concerned about the credibility of the seller and the car on offer. I mean, is this just change in consumer behaviours, David, Stephen? Is it a change in dealer attitudes towards consumers? What do you think this is really sort of hitting on now? Is this that consumers are just wanting more from the dealers? They want more trust from the dealers? Do you think it's just a general social change from consumers?
Yeah, I personally think it's that we're witnessing a massive change in society as well. I think the trust factors, the things that impact that are changing. I mean, just a bit of an aside, but I've noticed as well in the world of sort of professional speakers. A few years ago, you were hired to speak because of your expertise. You're now hired to speak because of your presence on TikTok, or your social media presence. I think, there is a shift in attitudes towards what constitutes someone being trustworthy, and it's all the stuff that we're familiar with, but it's also changing and accepting that other people are looking at that differently, and looking at your presence online and what other people have said about you and all that sort of stuff.
And David, I mean, you touched on it a little bit before when we were talking about the AI element within the dealer process now, and that consumer engagement. I mean, as an owner driver, independent retail, I mean, reputation, trustworthiness, and you as being, Cheshire Cars is David Bilsborough, is everything, isn't it, to you?
I've been very, very fortunate over the years, right up until the modern day, where some people will say to me, "You really are a great guy. I could tell that by your video, and I've looked on your reviews, and I can't find any bad reviews." I always say to them, rather smilingly, "Well, we shoot most people that give bad reviews, so we bury them." But it's so refreshing, and I always say this to them. I say, "Well, it's the way that you were brought up, as your parents brought you up. So I have all that to thank my parents for." And that's what Stephen said about society's changing. And it is definitely, I agree with Stephen 100%. But in business, yes, absolutely, especially in the car sales industry, we are only as good as our last sale or purchase, whichever. And of course, there's been some large changes to consumer law in the last 10, 15 years, CRA 2015. We're now selling cars to people that don't see them until they get delivered or picked up, whatever. So there's that side of it. And I do think it's a case of having a YouTube channel isn't just about displaying your products or your services. It's about engaging content and, giving good advice and supporting them for free, giving advice freely. If somebody picks up the phone to me and wants to ask me about one of my videos, I'll always say to them at the end, "Look, you've got a new contact. Please, feel free to ring me and ask me anything else." And I think that goes down well with people. Just be you, really, isn't it? Just being you. and being the best you can be, really, I think. And then that comes through in good businesses where they have a good ethics, and that is passed down through the staff at all levels, really. And I think, it's very obvious that people will deal with people whom they trust and believe in. And that's what hopefully Cheshire Cars has done for nearly 30 years.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and I think you're right about things like YouTube and and TikTok and whatever other channels you can use. Make a whole series of how-to videos. How do you program your sat nav? How do you change your radio stations? Silly little things like that we take for granted. That, as you say, is the stuff that potential customers will look at, and they'll feel that they know you and they feel they trust you. But I go back to what I always talk about, is that in order for the people in the dealerships to do that, they need to feel that they're mentally wealthy and looked after as well.
Yes.
And give them the space. So, that way they see all of this stuff.
Well, I mean, we better draw this to a close. I mean, for me, huge thank you from both Curtis and myself to you, David, for being a friend for so long, being a supporter of Motor Trade Radio, and for stepping in throughout the year when Curtis is on his little jollies, and he'll say the same to me when I'm off as well. But I think it's always great to have you on, and it's always great to have a conversation with people at the forefront and the front end of the sector and what's happening. And for me, wishing you all the best for a Christmas and obviously into 2026, both personally for David Bilsborough and for Cheshire Cars. And Stephen, thanks for again continuing to support the podcast through Unmissable moments and being there to support the industry in what is continually changing and challenging world that we find ourselves in, and I think what you're doing along with the people in that mental health and well-being is much needed. I think there's still a long way to go. Let's not kid ourselves. There's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of individuals, a lot of organisations that need to do a lot more in that mental health and well-being sector. But I think it does feel that we are making change. It's changing slowly, but then we know there's a lot more to do. So I think every little bit helps. So, and thank you for being such a supporter of the podcast over 2025 and as we head into 2026 there.
Yeah, thank you too.
Yeah, I'd like to extend my good wishes to both of you for Christmas and the New Year, and obviously Curtis as well. And it's never it's always, should I say, a privilege, and I'm very grateful to come on and chat with you and Curtis and Stephen. So long may that continue.
Fantastic. Well, that's it from today. So Curtis will be back next week as we head into the final for 2025 and Motor Trade Radio. But thank you for joining us on this special podcast this week. So until next week, it's goodbye from me.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.